Hello and welcome to the 105. I'm Cooper Petagna. That's 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting, Andrew Ivins. We got a jam-packed show for you today. Week 10 of college football always deliver. You look at the top 11, Drew, Penn State, Texas A&M, Iowa State, they all go down this past weekend. But sitting at the top of the college football playoff race, at least in the AP poll, we'll get the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings on Tuesday evening. Oregon, Drew. And it was a pretty, I would say, I don't know, complete victory for the Ducks in Ann Arbor. And Drew, without further ado, let's go into studs and duds. And I think you want to give Dan Lanning a little bit of love here.
I do, Cooper. That is my number one stud for the week. I don't think we talk enough about Oregon on this show, and we have talked about Oregon a lot and this move to the Big Ten and what Dan Lanning has been able to do there. He's built a contender on the West Coast. He carried the torch from Mario Cristobal in the roster construction. Well, you look up now, you said it, Oregon firmly in the college football playoff conversation. They go into Ann Arbor. They win 38-17. They had 300 yards of offense in the first half, a 28-10 halftime lead. The Ducks have now beaten both Michigan and Ohio State, which have combined for the last 7 league titles. To me, what stands out, Cooper, when you look at this roster is they're not having to play these young guys that Dan Lanning has recruited. I think it's an excellent blend of in-house player development and then acquisitions through the transfer portal. Obviously, you've got Dylan Gabriel, the Heisman contender there, a bunch of other pieces. But really, this is a complete physical roster. And I think for Oregon fans, for people in the Big Ten, get ready because Dan Lanning isn't changing anything. They get it done on the recruiting trail. Signing day, it's a month away. We know that Oregon is going to finish strong. It's just really impressive to see what he has been able to build so far. And I'm excited to see how they finish out this season. They got Maryland at Wisconsin, Washington at home. They're going to be undefeated. And this is a team that I think can go head to head, obviously, with anyone in the country.
It's been pretty amazing to think about a team that used to be in the Pac-12. I mean, we're talking about Eugene, Oregon, hard place to get to. You can, I guess, say at times a little bit of a difficult place to recruit to as well. Now in the NIL and the transfer portal era, it seems like Dan Lanning, along with Phil Knight, everything that they're doing there, they just seem to be clicking. But in 2.5 years, you think about starting with the 2022 cycle, Drew, and you mentioned it, that transition class. Oregon has built the most complete roster in the Big Ten, and you talked about victories against Michigan and Ohio State. They look like they're in line to play in a Big Ten championship, also represent the Big Ten in a college football playoff. We're going to talk about USC here in just a few moments. It's pretty remarkable the job that Dan Lanning and his staff have done in such a short amount of time. Drew, I'm going to go to the SEC here. How about South Carolina? Huge win over Texas A&M. They were knotted at halftime, 20-20, and then South Carolina offensively, just an explosive game for Shane Beamer's crew. And how about Rocket Sanders and also Joshua Simon, the tight end? Both these guys transfers. Rocket Sanders coming over from Arkansas, Joshua Simon coming over from Western Kentucky a couple years ago. Rocket Sanders, 20 attempts on the ground, 144 yards, 2 touchdowns. He also had 5 receptions for 92 yards out of the backfield. Simon, he added 4 receptions for 132 and 2 tutties as well. The Gamecocks racked up 530 yards of total offense, 244 passing yards, along with 286 on the ground. They're 5-3 on the season. And Drew, all of a sudden you look at South Carolina, tough loss against Alabama, tough loss against LSU. But if you were to make a case, and I know it's early, they got to take care of business the rest of the way. But South Carolina, outside looking in, maybe could have a case as a 3-loss team that could make the college football playoff. They're clicking right now. I don't think anybody wants to see them.
Shane Beamer's done an excellent job. I mean, he's doing it on the recruiting front. Dylan Stewart, the true freshman pass rusher, he had a huge night as well. Cooper, Rocket Sanders, Rocket Man, he is from Florida's Space Coast. I don't think I've ever told you this. I actually thought he was going to be a linebacker in college, so it's been fun to see him get it done on offense. 2-way player in high school. Love that pick. Huge weekend for the Gamecocks, and they're getting it going on the recruiting trail as well. Cooper, my first dud. How about Georgia quarterback Carson Beck? 3 interceptions against Florida. Georgia gets it done, but Carson Beck, you look at him, what he has done over the past 5 games, 11 INTs, 12 turnover-worthy passes, according to the folks at Pro Football Focus. Carson Beck, his first 17 starts for the Bulldogs, he had 0 multi-interceptions games. Now, his past two contests, Texas and Florida, his worst career ratings as a passer, according to PFF. I am concerned if I'm a Georgia fan about what this offense is going to be able to do over the next month and into the college football playoff. Yes, they get it done against Billy Napier and the Gators, which were without their top four players. DJ Lagway gets hurt. Obviously, Graham Mertz is out. Have to lean on the run game. But man, it seems like Carson Beck just is seeing some ghosts out there. And you kind of dig into the analytics. He's getting a little bit pressured more than he was last season. I think he's missing Ladd McConkey, and I think he's missing Brock Bowers. I have limited confidence in Carson Beck moving forward, and that's not a good thing for UGA.
Well, I guess that's my question, Drew, in the response here. At this rate, and you mentioned the turnovers are an issue, especially with the interceptions in consecutive games. But do you think Carson Beck is playing well enough for Georgia to go into the college football playoff and win a national championship right now?
I think it's going to come down to Georgia's defense, and they're going to have to get that running game going behind Nate Frazier, the true freshman who we saw there in Jacksonville against Florida. You know, his most exposure since really the start of this season. I do have some concerns. And Cooper, we talked about it last week on the 105. You look at Georgia's depth chart. Gunnar Stockton is the quarterback behind Carson Beck. He's only played 82 career snaps. Behind him, you got Jaden Rashada, the former blue chip recruit who was committed to Florida, went to Arizona State, started two games as a true freshman. I do have some concerns for Georgia. They're going to have to muck it up, and that's what Kirby Smart wants to do. But that offense, where are the weapons? Where are the tight ends? And Carson Beck, him turning it over, you know, I don't think this is a case of just some bad bounces. He's making some bad decisions, and that is concerning.
Yeah, potentially leaving some money on the table as well. You think about Carson Beck coming in the season, Heisman favorite, also probably the favorite to be the number one pick in the draft. Drew performances against Texas, even in Florida in a win, a little bit troublesome for NFL evaluators. All right, Drew, my dud, Lincoln Riley, USC, and what is going on in Los Angeles, in La La Land with Lincoln Riley, and what does that marriage look like? In his last 16 games, he's 6-10, Drew. You're talking about a team right now struggling inside a Big Ten play. We talked about Oregon and the seamless transition that they've made to Big Ten conference play. I think this really kind of stems from the architect of roster building of Lincoln Riley and not having a Heisman winner and a number one draft pick in Caleb Williams. Now you go to Miller Moss, who's been bright at sometimes this season and struggled at other times. Drew, a loss to Washington, tough for them. They have Nebraska at home, and then they're on the road to at UCLA, who just beat Nebraska, and then you got Notre Dame. So this is really, I would say, a struggling pattern for Lincoln Riley. You think about what he did at Oklahoma. He was 55-10, Drew. He's got a $90 million buyout. I don't think he's going anywhere anytime soon. You also think about the recruiting chops as well. They're ranked inside the top 10. But think about these guys, man. You got Jerome Miles, Texas A&M, still recruiting hard. Hayden Lowe, they're obviously in a good spot to keep there. But what happens to Julian Lewis? Been rumored to be flirting with Indiana and both Colorado as well. And it seems more likely than not, he'll probably end up in a different uniform than USC, Drew. Just in terms of the fit and the awareness and the lack of urgency, both on and off the field for Lincoln Riley. And you hear some of the quotes after the game. He's saying, well, it's not like we're getting our rear end kicked. And I understand what he's saying, but there is a standard at USC that is not being met, that these people that support this program and the players themselves, they expect more. This is not why they're paying Lincoln Riley all that money, Drew. He's been a flat-out disappointment. There's really no other way to explain that. And for Jedd Fisch in year one to have that much roster turnover and to get that win at home says a lot more about Lincoln Riley than it does Jedd Fisch, in my opinion. And Jedd Fisch should be given a lot of credit. But this is a bad loss and a tough one to stomach if you're a Trojans fan.
Okay, but I got some thoughts on the Trojans. We're going to get it on the back end of the show, but I fully agree. What is next for Lincoln Riley? How does he turn it around there in Los Angeles? Hey, my next stud, how about North Carolina running back Omarion Hampton? A lot of people play fantasy football. I think this guy's going to be on your roster next season when you're doing those rookie drafts. He produced in a big way for the Tar Heels at Florida State, 35-11 win for UNC. Omarion Hampton, 172 rushing yards, 93 receiving yards, a career high 5 touchdowns on 35 touches. Omarion Hampton gives Mac Brown his first ever win over the Seminoles. Kind of love that little nugget there. And Cooper, I totally forgot. Marion Hampton, a former member of my Freaks list back in 2022. He was number 37 on there. Marion Hampton was deadlifting 585 pounds as an eighth grader. Also could hang clean 320 pounds, bench press 385 pounds. It's been a disappointing season there in Chapel Hill post Drake May, but Marion Hampton is a bright spot. He's getting it done for the Tar Heels as they look for bowl eligibility.
The way to your heart via the weight room, right? That is the way to go, especially if you want to find a spot on the Freaks list. All right, Drew, I'm going to go with Willie Fritz in Houston. You and I have long been fans of Willie Fritz. Obviously, he came on the podcast when he was back at Tulane, but the way that Houston and really Willie Fritz has built programs, you go back all the way to Georgia Southern, to Tulane, and now what he's doing at Houston, he's 4-5 right now. People might be thinking out there, all right, this guy's got a losing record, but with the turnover that they've had, Drew, you look at the last couple of weeks as well, they beat number 17, Kansas State. They're putting it together. They're not playing the most complete ball. The week before that, they beat Utah as well. So the arrow is pointing up. And Drew, we like what they're doing on the recruiting trail as well. A couple guys inside the top 247, recruiting the state of Texas really well, still recruiting Louisiana too. I think Willie Fritz, 2 years from now, Houston's going to be a really, really big problem in the Big 12. I just love the way that this guy can put his fingerprints all over a program. He's done it time and time and time again. He has the formula to build a winner. I think he's going to do that in H-Town.
It's difficult to handicap, I think, the future of the Big 12. We knew that coming into this season. How about moving forward? I mean, who do you kind of bet on to emerge as the toast of that conference? I think you have to look at Houston and Willie Fritz because we know it's only going to get better as more of his players are on that roster. Love that one, Cooper. My next stud, how about Ohio State wide receiver Brandon Ennis? I'm going to be honest, Cooper. When he caught that touchdown pass against Penn State for the Buckeyes, I had to do a double take. I'm like, who is that Brandon Ennis there? He only played 3 offensive snaps, 2 catches, 31 yards, and a touchdown. This is the former number 35 player in the country, a kid. We went back and forth. Hey, did we make him a 5-star prospect? He was someone that was on the recruiting scene for 5 or 6 years. I can't remember how many times I wrote Brandon Ennis, top performer, Brandon Ennis, alpha dog. He did it time and time again under the lights on Friday nights. He did it on the camp circuit, 7-on-7 circuit. I thought it was a cool moment for him to step up in a big way for Ohio State. He's a guy that came in with Carnell Tate, has been overshadowed by Mr. Tate, and then obviously Jeremiah Smith. But he's there. He came up big, caught those passes from Will Howard, helped them get that huge win in Happy Valley.
Yeah, the irony is I'm getting ready to talk about another guy from the state of Florida. And you think about Brandon Ennis, South Florida Express, his 7-on-17, played his ball at American Heritage. Kind of thought that he was one of the more day one ready, collegiate ready receivers in the country. How about this guy, man? Xavier Restrepo from Miami becomes the career receiving yards leader at Miami. Drew, you think about all the names that have come through: Andre Johnson, Reggie Wayne, Santana Moss, whose record he broke. Xavier Restrepo did it in pretty exciting fashion on Saturday against Duke, and Manny Diaz, the coach that originally recruited him at Miami, 8 receptions, 146 yards, 3 touchdowns as Miami gets a 53-31 victory over Duke in the Blue Devils, man. Every time I watch Xavier Restrepo play, and it's kind of a little bit of a complementary skill set with a guy like Cam Ward, who does a phenomenal job of extending plays. But you talk about a heady receiver operating out of the slot, knowing how to create separation, and just having a good feel for getting open. That's Xavier Restrepo, and as much credit as Cam Ward gets, and it's deserved, this season is not the season that Miami's having without Restrepo.
And a fun nugget there, Restrepo would not be at Miami if it wasn't for Manny Diaz. He probably would have signed with Kentucky. Manny Diaz made sure to take Xavier Restrepo. Just funny how that has all worked out. Hey, Cooper, my last dud. How about Brent Pry in close games? Virginia Tech over the weekend gives up 35 points in the second half to Syracuse, goes on to lose in overtime. Virginia Tech was kind of a potential dark horse for a lot of people to win the ACC. They're now 1-11 in one-score games under Brent Pry. You look at Virginia Tech's recruiting classes, they finished 45th last year, currently ranked 45th this year. Just kind of wonder if pressure is mounting there for Pry and the Hokies.
I'm going to go with Arizona. 3-6 right now. You got Noah Fafita, Tedero McMillan, Takario Davis. Drew, you talked about those top 100 prospects. Drew, this is a team that's not performing. They got throttled by UCF, who was on their fourth starting quarterback. And guess what? They gave up 602 yards. They only had 261 yards of total offense. UCF has not been playing good football. This, if it is a sign of things to come for Brent Brennan, it's a little bit scary if you're an Arizona fan, especially given the amount of talent that they have on this team. Guys, that does it for Studs and Duds. Stick around. We got some freshman flowers coming up next. Welcome back to the 105. Time for Week 10 Freshman Flowers, where we give a bouquet to the freshmen that are balling out there, and no shortage of options again, Drew. But I'm going to start with a guy that you're pretty familiar with, scouting the state of Florida. How about C.J. Bailey, NC State, man? This kid gets better and better and better every week. The high school quarterback of Jeremiah Smith, so you might be familiar with that name a little bit. But he finished 18 of 20 for 234 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a big win for NC State over Stanford, 59-28. Drew, you turn on that tape, it's like NFL throw after NFL throw. And I think the other thing that kind of pops is the timing, the anticipation. He gains more and more confidence by the week. I love the way that he's able to kind of dish out on the perimeter as well with a moving pocket. You see the foundation of a quarterback that is really starting to get the hang of this thing the more that he plays. And Drew, we kind of labeled him as more a raw developmental upside guy that was going to need some time, maybe behind a guy like Grayson McCall. Well, injuries put him in the limelight. And Drew, he's just responded. He's got so much more, I think, gamer and natural ability to him than I quite honestly anticipated coming out of high school in Chaminade Madonna. But he's been a fun one to watch. And if you're NC State, you're saying, all right, well, one, how do we keep this guy in the boat and not be a guy that's going to get poached this offseason? But two, we feel like we have our quarterback of the future. And if you're an NC State fan, that should make you really, really excited and really, really relieved as well.
Absolutely, Cooper. And I think the biggest thing with C.J. Bailey is we kind of said this when he, coming out of high school. It's like, all right, close your eyes, don't look at the release, and just see where the football goes. And you'll be happy with where it lands, because he might not have the cleanest mechanics, but this is a kid that's been winning football games since he was in the youth parks as an 8 and 9-year-old. He's always been the guy that has kind of drove the boat and been an engineer. And he's turning into a fighter pilot here in college. I think for NC State, this is the ideal situation. You know, the feedback over the summer months is that they were super excited about C.J. Bailey, and then he gets the chance because Grayson McCall is injured. It's funny, Cooper, just being in the state of Florida, you know, you hear Florida State struggling, right? You know, what's next for Miami after Cam Ward? I think there's a lot of fans of the Big Three regretting that their school did not go after C.J. Bailey. So he's exceeded certainly our expectations, but I thought he was playing his best football as a senior. Strong showing at the Under Armour All-America game in Orlando, and I think he is the quarterback of the future there in Raleigh.
Yeah, it's a big, I would say, revelation for NC State, and especially Dave Dorn, as they have seemed to kind of turn things around this season, now at 5-4 behind C.J. Bailey. Drew, who do you got next?
I got UCLA wide receiver Quandre Gilmore. This is another guy that showed up late at the postseason All-Star games against Nebraska. 3 catches, 88 yards, and a touchdown. Helped UCLA get a rare win in Big Ten country. We mentioned on the front end of the show, you know, the Pac-12 schools playing in the Big Ten. They've had issues coming across the country, and a huge win. Gilmore, 48-yard touchdown in the third quarter, gave the Bruins a 3-score lead. I just keep going back into my head, Cooper, at the Polynesian Bowl. He was strong all week during practices. You heard it from Greg Biggins, Brandon Huffman, Blair Angulo. They were out there covering the event for us. And then in the actual game, you know, he had 5 catches for 60 yards. UCLA, it's going to be a turnaround there, but it seems like Gilmore can be a building block for the Bruins.
All right, Drew, I'm going back to the state of Florida again with another guy that you're familiar with. How about Isaac Brown, Louisville? And you talk about this kid. He's been so dynamic for Jeff Brom in this offense as Louisville got a huge win over Clemson on the road. And Drew, he was a big part of it. 20 attempts on the ground, 151 yards rushing. He also had a touchdown as well. He's over 800 yards for the season and 7 touchdowns already. You saw on Saturday night, averaging 7.5 plus per carry, Drew. This kid has been really, really good. It's funny. You and I always talk about these running backs, and we're going to talk about another one here in a minute down at ULM doing some things. These guys just seem like the hardest to pin for us. You know, we talk about the vision, the balance, the contact balance, the way that these guys run instinctually is part of the process that you have to weigh a little bit more than maybe some of the verified testing. But Isaac Brown, man, you watch him on Saturday versus Clemson, and the other group that I want to give a lot of kudos to is that offensive line going up against a really vaunted front in Clemson. They did a really good job creating space for Isaac Brown, but man, taking advantage of the opportunities, getting skinny between the tackles, hitting the crease, and then taking advantage of those explosive plays when he was given the opportunity to do that, man. He is a fun player. I think pound for pound, maybe one of the biggest surprises that we've had in this 2024 cycle.
Yeah, he's made everyone quickly forget about Penny Boone there in the Derby City. 45-yard touchdown run. I don't even think he was touched on that. I mean, he's a kid. Went back and forth, 4-star, 3-star. Isaac Brown, he did it for 4 straight years at Homestead High School. Also really good pass catcher. I thought he was one of the top return men in the entire 2024 cycle. Am I surprised he's doing it here as a true freshman? Absolutely. But then again, he's a big play waiting to happen. He is certainly doing it for Louisville, another kind of cornerstone for that program moving forward. And another one where you talk with the staff there back during the summer months, they were fired up about Isaac Brown. A lot of them giving me some crap for him not finishing as a 4-star prospect for us. Coop, my other freshman stud, freshman flower, how about Georgia running back Nate Frazier? Came up big for the Bulldogs. We talked about Carson Beck, him and the turnovers. Frazier, 44 yards after contact, 19 carries for 82 and a touchdown. That score came in the third quarter. His classmate, Dwight Phillips, also scored in the fourth quarter for Georgia, give them that 2-score lead in the 34-20 victory. Nate Frazier, I think he's going to be a name to know. We heard a lot about him in the preseason, saw some of him against Clemson in the opener. He's been dinged up here and there, but for a guy that can find some daylight behind that huge offensive line, he was excellent, and he delivered in a key spot for Georgia. You think about how they recruit, still a true freshman is the guy making the biggest impact, the difference down the stretch.
Yeah, you and I talked a couple weeks ago about which freshman could impact the college football playoff race. How about Nate Frazier? I think it was the guy that we left off the list. You look at that Georgia running back room, Drew, for whatever reason, it just the lack of depth, not lack of talent, but the availability there has put Nate Frazier in a spot where he should be able to capitalize on the reps and the touches that he's been given. Drew, a couple other names that stood out in Week 10, Dylan Stewart, South Carolina. I think he's been on this list probably more so than anybody else that we've talked about this year. O.J. Frederick, another guy who's blossomed into a really good starting piece for Miami. The cornerback there had a great day against Duke. And then Ahmad Hardy at ULM, Drew. You talk about guys that could potentially be poached this offseason. And that's nothing against ULM. It's another guy over 800 yards rushing, probably going to be over 1,000 yards at this point. Drew, he ran for 207 yards against Marshall. He's been dynamite this year as well. The last thing I'll say on this group, Dylan Stewart, every time I watch him, I mean, this guy's got superstar written all over him already, Drew. Playing against Texas A&M, he's getting the treatment, double team treatment already. He's getting chipped off the edge. The amount of respect that SEC teams have for this young man already is pretty special.
Yeah, and then with O.J. Frederick, I mean, first career interception for the Hurricanes. Zaquan Patterson also making plays in that secondary. Look, Miami's not strong there, but Frederick was an excellent evaluation for Mario Cristobal and that staff. A kid that didn't play a ton of corner as a senior in high school, but the biggest thing that they saw on tape was his ability to compete, and that continues to show up as the season progresses. I mean, that's like essentially hitting on an undrafted free agent, if we want to compare this to the NFL draft. Not a guy where there was a ton of name, image, likeness conversations. Really, really good job for Miami because he's stepped up big.
Some tough losses in Week 10. James Franklin, Dabo Swinney, Mike Norvell, Lincoln Riley, all guys that got to answer a lot of questions. So coming up next, we'll play a game of hold or fold and which programs that should double down on their convictions or maybe start looking elsewhere. Welcome back to the 105. Time for a new segment. Drew, I'm pretty excited about hold or fold, kind of like poker a little bit, where we will talk about some programs and really in particular some coaches, whether or not we're going to stick with these guys or maybe we're going to put our cards down and kind of move in a different direction. And Drew, let's talk about Penn State, James Franklin. Man, a rough one for the Nittany Lions as they lose another top 5 matchup to Ohio State, 20-13, 2 trips inside the 5, resulting in 0 points. Tough, Drew, especially for our producer, Ryan Stryker. Franklin now 1-10 against the Buckeyes with 5 of Penn State's 10 losses to Ohio State coming by single digits. He's 3-18 against top 10 opponents, Drew. So I guess I'll tee you up on this one. Are you holding or folding on James Franklin?
I'm holding. I mean, I think Penn State, you look at what they did this offseason. Andy Koltanecki comes in, Tom Allen, some other additions via the transfer portal. To me, Cooper, the big nugget from that game over the weekend, Penn State's wide receivers combined to catch just 3 passes. I am holding on James Franklin, but I want to know what the answer is at wide receiver. I felt like we had this same conversation a year ago when we were talking about the Nittany Lions. That seems to be a missing piece for them. They do not have a true wide receiver 1. I don't even think they have a true wide receiver 2 on the roster. And this is a roster management show, Cooper, where we are very aware of what's coming in, what they've added through the transfer portal. I don't look at this recruiting class. I don't see a potential wide receiver 1. That was the same case last cycle. It was the same case the cycle before that. So for me, I think from my personnel perspective, my big question is where's that go-to difference maker on the outside? I think Penn State could have used one in the red zone against Ohio State.
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, you think about Penn State, what they've done. They get the #1 quarterback in the country in 2022 and Drew Aller, and they get him from the state of Ohio. And Aller's been solid. They changed coordinators. You talked about Koltanecki there. You talked about Tom Allen on defense. So I think the encouraging part for Penn State fans is that James Franklin has shown a willingness to change. The biggest thing that needs to change is they're not dynamic enough, especially at the skill spots, Drew. You talked about that. I mean, think about the guys that they have in the backfield. You got Nicholas Singleton, Katron Allen, maybe one of the best 2-headed monsters in the entire country. They have a good offensive line. They've continued to recruit that position well. They have a good front 7. The tight ends as well, Drew, we like them a lot. Tyler Warren, one of the best in the country. Luke Reynolds, they got guys there. Rappel, another guy that we like. So they have recruited consistently at, I would say, if you could describe it as one word, as good, but not elite. They're kind of in that top 10 to top 12 range year in and year out. But if you're going to get over the hump, then Drew, we talk about it all the time. You have to have the playmaking ability and you have to have the play caller as well, which I think that they have 2 out of the 3, right? When we talk about the 3 Ps, they are missing the guys on the outside. 3 combined catches for the receivers against Ohio State, Drew. I'm going to hold, but it's up to James Franklin. He always says, I'm going to look at myself in the mirror. You're not that far off. You got to go out there and you got to get it done. You know what needs to be done. Go get it done. You know, this is not a team that is so getting blown out by 2 or 3 scores in these type of games, Drew. They're right there, except they have not won the big game. You go back year over year, this is a team that in the big moments, they don't have enough firepower. He knows what he needs to get done. But if you're Penn State, where else are you going to go? Who are you going to go hire? Right? This is the guy that you got to stick with, and this is your future right here in James Franklin. He's got to have some honest conversations. I think he'll get it right, but it is also a little discouraging that it's taken this long not to fix that position as well. All right, Drew, here's one. The next one, Dabo Swinney. We've talked about this a lot. Talked about him last year when we're talking about buying or selling stock. Dabo Swinney, Drew, coming off a tough loss to Louisville. We talked about the performance that Isaac Brown had. It really wasn't even that close. I thought Louisville went in there, they handled business, and you look at Clemson and you look at what they've done this year. The first game of the season, they play Georgia. They get blown out in that game. And then the rest of the way, Drew, they've only beaten one team over 500, and that was NC State and C.J. Bailey's first start as a collegiate player. So who is Clemson? What are they about? Are they good enough on offense? Do they have the guys in the skill position? Can they continue to be one-dimensional from a talent acquisition standpoint? I just see them slowly but surely letting go of the rope. Are things fine? Are things okay? Are they going to win 9, 10 games a year? Yes, that's fine. Are they any closer to a national championship? No. And here's the thing. You look at Clemson, and we'll hear the same thing that we did last year. Well, we won 9 games and we won 10 games. But yeah, you look at everything and you take a step back and you're saying, this team's not as good as their record. It's typically the other way around. And you look at what Clemson has here down the road at Virginia Tech, at Pitt, Citadel, South Carolina, Drew. I think it's going to be fascinating to kind of see how Dabo Swinney finishes the season. And I hate to be the devil's advocate here, but even if you reel off 4 in a row, I don't know if I'm looking at this program a lot different. Who's the guy after Cade Klubnik? Chris Vizina? Who's the guy you got in this class? I don't know. Are they that much better at premium positions? I'm just kind of like, where are these guys? Where was that kind of just confidence that this is one of the best teams in the country that you feared walking into Death Valley at night? Louisville just walked in there, the second best team that they played all season, and waxed them. So with that being said, I'm going to fold here, and it's not like everything is going to hell. It's not. But in terms of Clemson moving closer to their goals of being a national title contender, I don't think they're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out which way you were going to go, hold or fold there. I'm going to go with a hold. And to me, I think if you listen to everything Dabo has said since Saturday night's loss, which, by the way, I need to fact check this. I believe this is the first night game they've lost in Death Valley since 2013. That's not encouraging. I'm going to hold because I think Dabo is going to make some staff changes on the defensive side of the ball. You just kind of read the tea leaves and go through his comments, putting it on him. And I think him means his staff. And really, Cooper, Clemson, you look at the construction of that roster, where the strength should be. It's in that front seven. It's on the defensive line. And the Tigers right now, the defense ranks 95th nationally in yards per carry allowed, 4.61 yards per attempt. Louisville ran for 8.4 yards per carry against them. They just couldn't get the stop. Yeah, Clemson can run the football this season. They can't stop the run, and I think that has become a compounding issue, especially when they get these matches with teams that can contend for a spot in the college football playoff. So I'm holding because I want to see what does Dabo do this offseason. We've seen him go outside his tree, right? He's made some hires. He's got guys that he's not familiar with. Matt Luke on the offensive line, Rumpf on the defensive line. So I think it's going to be a big offseason for the Tigers and Dabo in terms of, all right, which direction do we go? And I do agree, long-term outlook at quarterback, a bit of a head scratcher. They have to figure that out. Didn't sign a quarterback last year from the high school ranks. Don't have one committed right now, a month before signing day. Cade Klubnik's eventually going to be gone. Who is stepping in? Because we know they're not going to go in the transfer portal to get a signal caller.
Well, he can make all the staff changes, and I'm not saying, all right, like, maybe he moves on from Wes Goodwin or whatever it is, but from a talent acquisition standpoint, Drew, and they've been good. Like this is a good evaluating program. But in terms of where you need to be, if you're only going to rely on high school and playing young players, you have to be at such an elite level that there is no drop off. Even if it was Georgia recruiting the way that they did, playing those type of freshmen, you're going to have some type of drawback, some type of fall off as well. So a tightrope that I think Dabo Swinney is walking there at Clemson. All right, Drew, let's talk about Mike Norvell, Florida State. It's been rough, man. It's FSU's worst start since the Noles went 1-11 in 1974. The Seminoles' 1-7 record in the ACC is also their worst mark since they joined the league. They lost to North Carolina, Drew, 35-11. This doesn't even look like a team that's like in it anymore. You watch the tape, even if you're watching Omari and Hampton, it's hard not to be perplexed by the tackling effort by Florida State there, Drew. It's gotten to the point, you look at what they've done recruiting-wise, they're number 47 in the country right now, Drew. They have 11 commitments, guys at the top, Solomon Thomas, Kevin Wynn. It's like, all right, can they hold on to these guys? You got LSU, others working on Thomas. You got Georgia working on Kevin Wynn. The teams that we talked about when you're talking about holding, right, for Penn State and why you think they can get over the hump, it's because James Franklin has put them in a position with what they do year to year on the high school side that says, all right, we got a chance and we're not that close. You look at Florida State, it's like I'm looking for any glimmer of hope here. for the Noles to sell the Noles faithful. And I'm like, I can't find it. I don't know where it is. They just seem like they have dug themselves a hole, Drew. And when they took advantage of the portal, it seems like everybody else was a little hesitant, a little bit resistant, and they went in there and they caught lightning in a bottle for 2 straight years. And now the playing field is kind of leveled out, and Mike Norvell and Florida State are kind of stuck in a position right now. I hate to use the same analogy that I did, but it's kind of like a sailboat with no wind, right? Like I talked about that before, recruiting wise. It's just like, I don't see a way out of this. I don't know what this looks like for Florida State going forward and how they kind of dig themselves out. So I'm going to fold here, unfortunately, as well on Mike Norvell.
Yeah, I'm folding as well. $60 million buyout for Mike Norvell. It's hard to see Florida State making a move there, but you're right, Cooper. How do you turn things around here? You're going to have to go into the transfer portal and grab 30 plus guys, and it's getting harder and harder to hit on those individuals because, like you said, everyone else is in the transfer portal looking for an immediate help. I don't know for Florida State, the 2026 recruiting class, so those would be the high school juniors. They're ranked in the top 10 there. They got some guys committed. Can they hold on to them? I think that's a big question. The other thing that stands out at Florida State, Luke Kromenhoek, the true freshman quarterback, a guy we really, really like, but he's someone that needed plenty of time to develop. Now he's thrust into action. He throws 2 interceptions against North Carolina. That's not a recipe to set him up for long-term success, right? Thrusting him into action when he's not ready to go behind an offensive line that can't block anybody. I don't know how Norvell does this. Another school where, hey, that December, it's going to look interesting. Staff changes, roster retention, high school recruiting. It's all going to come together in that 20-day stretch. Not going to be a fun time for Norvell.
All right, Drew, the last school on here, and I'm going to hit them quickly and get out because of time constraints, but USC, Lincoln Riley, 4-5, 2-4 in the Big Ten. They had that big win against LSU. You thought this team was kind of turning a corner, Drew. I don't know if Lincoln Riley has the year-to-year appetite to handle the recruiting the way that we talked about Dan Lanning, the consistency that needs to be brought year in and year out. I think he lacks it, and I don't think he's got that killer instinct at all. And I'm kind of befuddled by everything that USC has put out on the field, and I think that is more than likely because, well, they're spitting image of their head coach. So that's why USC is in the position that they're in. So I'm going to fold there as well. And Drew, with that, we're only about around a month until National Signing Day. So we're going to take a look at some teams that need a strong 30-plus days to put the cherry on top for NSD. Stay locked. Welcome back to the 105, about a month away until National Signing Day. And that leads to the question, Drew, who are the teams that need to finish strong here over the next 30 days to really kind of give their fan base, I would say, a little bit of hope and a little bit of excitement going into next year?
Well, let's start with Michigan, right? The defending national champions. Obviously, it has been a rough go of things on the field for Sharon Moore in year one, but you look at the recruiting trail, it seems like they're finally kicking it into gear. They've had a ton of visitors the past 2 weeks, and the biggest nugget really is they're involved with Bryce Underwood, our number 1 ranked prospect in the country, quarterback that me and you both think can play in year one. He is a longtime LSU commit, but he's from right there in Michigan. Linked to him, sounds like the Wolverines are involved. NIL compensation, that's all getting tossed around out there. But you also got to give Michigan credit. I mean, they flipped top 247 cornerback Shamari Earls from Georgia, trending for Elijah Dotson, our number 10 ranked safety, Cooper. It seems like Michigan has a plan all of a sudden. And I think for Sharon Moore, that's important because he needs something to point to as they head into that 2025 season.
Now, for all the criticism of Sharon Moore, and well-deserved in my opinion, what they've been able to do the last couple weeks on the recruiting front is certainly reason for optimism. I think if you're a Michigan fan, Drew, you mentioned Shamari Earl's been banged up a little bit this year, has struggled to stay healthy, but this is a guy that, when healthy, we thought really kind of had an outside shot at a top 32 spot, one of the more gifted corners in the class. We love him from a height, weight, speed standpoint. You think about Grayson Littleton, who just decommitted from Clemson, Cristobal in there from Sam Webb at Michigan Insider, Drew. Not to mention guys like Elijah Dotson that you mentioned currently committed to Pittsburgh. If they end up with those two guys and they flip Benny Patterson from Cincinnati, you like what Michigan is doing in this class. Feels kind of like an old school throwback Jim Harbaugh type of class, guys that they develop 2 to 3 years down the line and that are kind of key cogs in the machine for the Wolverines. So Michigan, one of those teams to keep an eye out on right now. They rank number 13 according to 24/7 Sports. Drew, the other team, about Ole Miss, sitting at number 21 right now, 18 commitments. And this is a little bit different because Ole Miss is one of those teams, they're going to lose a ton of production, right? They invested heavily in the transfer portal this offseason, but what's it going to look like next year? Jackson Dart gone, maybe it's Austin Simmons who jumps in for him, but have they built the line of scrimmages well enough via the high school ranks to be a team that can contend in the SEC year in and year out? Guys like Caleb Cunningham, Chaz Coleman, kind of the names left on the board, Drew, but they're in a pretty interesting spot going into 2025.
And I think they need to capitalize on the fact that they're still in the college football playoff conversation, right? Cooper, Florida State, I think at the beginning of the year, I wrote about it in the talent tracker on CBS Sports. Hey, everyone laugh now about them falling off after a magical 13-0 season. I said that could happen to your school as well, because when you push all those chips in, it creates a situation where, hey, maybe some of the players that we signed from the high school ranks aren't getting those developmental reps in practice. And it's so easy when you are looking at the veterans that are available that are going to help you right away to push high school recruiting to the side and not focus on that. And I think that's what Florida State's going through. I'm not saying that, hey, Ole Miss, they're going to be looking at a 1-8 season next year, but I do think they need to get it done on the high school ranks. The big name I have circled for them, 5-star wide receiver Caleb Cunningham, committed to Alabama. A lot of schools kind of looking at him. Ole Miss is going to lose their pass catchers. Those guys are going to be off to the NFL. Who's going to step in and be able to move the chains for them? Caleb Cunningham would certainly make life much easier.
All right, let's talk about another school in the SEC in Florida, Drew. They're 4-4 right now, but at the same time, it feels like people have a little bit more confidence in Billy Napier, just given what we've seen over the last couple of weeks, playing well, played tough against Georgia, especially given the circumstances that they're missing some of their best players. Got some good news today. According to Billy Napier, it seems like DJ Lagway injury to his hamstring, not as significant as they thought. Could have an opportunity to potentially play this week. Drew, that kind of changes things in terms of how you look at the next couple of weeks. But right now, Florida ranked number 51 in the recruiting rankings. They only have 11 commitments. The two guys on top of that class, Drew, Vernell Brown, Ben Hanks, both those guys' legacies, Miami pushing for both of them. It's got to be so important for Billy Napier to find a way to keep those two dudes in the boat.
And I feel like Napier's had his hands tied behind his back. And I know you'll disagree with me here, but with so much uncertainty about his future, it's kind of, hampered Billy Napier and his staff's ability to recruit. The fan base has not made it easy for him. And that's unfortunate, because if Billy Napier does come back, Cooper, you look at some of these true freshmen that are making plays from the Gators. Those are guys that were key evaluations that where the Gators beat everyone else to the punch. Jaden Ball, that was a guy they got on late last cycle. So I'm excited to see maybe how Florida finishes here if it is Billy Napier, because I think if you're a Florida fan, you need to look at some of the guys on the roster and realize, hey, these guys made strong avowals. Jack Pyburn, the edge rusher, that's another guy that Florida's staff kind of beat a bunch of people out on. So to me, Billy Napier, we'll see what his future holds, but I do think his staff does a great job of evaluating talent, sitting 51st right now. If they keep him, hey, can they get closer to a top 5 class?
All right, guys, Billy Napier, critical games coming up next. Stick around. We'll be back right after this. Welcome back to the 105. Just a reminder, you can find Andrew Ivins and myself, Cooper Petagna, every Monday and Wednesday. Monday, 2 o'clock Eastern on CBS Sports Network, and Wednesday at 1 o'clock Eastern on the 24/7 Sports YouTube channel. Guys, we appreciate you guys for watching. As always, for Andrew Ivins, I'm Cooper Petagna. Have a great rest of your week. We'll see you next time.